I'm going to interrupt Natasha there, bring you here to Doha. Defence ministers from the Gulf Cooperation Council countries are meeting here in Doha following Israel's attack on Hamas officials in Qatar. This is the Secretary General of the GCC, Jasem Mohamed AlBudaiwi. Let's listen in.
In the GCC Council's extraordinary meeting in September 2025 in Doha, directed that the GCC Joint Defense Council would hold an emergency meeting in Doha to assess and evaluate the defense position of the GCC countries and evaluate the situation in light of the Israeli attack against the state of Qatar, and direct the joint military leadership to take necessary steps to activate joint defense mechanisms. The Joint Defense Council held its extraordinary meeting on Thursday in Doha, presided by His Excellency Sheikh Saud Al-Thani, and head of the Joint Defense Council. In its extraordinary session, attended by the Ministers of Defense of the GCC countries. Their Highness and Excellencies, members of the Joint Defense Council, has deliberated the attack on Israel and the egregious violation of Qatar's sovereignty, and they have condemned in the strongest of terms such an attack. And such an aggressive attack is a violation, egregious violation of the UN Charter and international law, and constitutes an attack against Qatar and against all GCC member states, and they need to take all necessary steps to counter such an attack and to defend against it. And such an attack threatens all stability in the region and infringes and hampers all the efforts exerted by Qatar as their role as mediators to reach to a ceasefire in Gaza that leads to the release of all captives. And according to the Joint Defense Agreement, the Joint Defense Council has decided the following. First, increase sharing intelligence information through the Joint Military Command. Second, share all the aerial position among the GCC countries. The third is to activate all early warning systems against anti-ballistic missiles. Fourth, to activate all joint plans and training among the GCC countries. The fifth is to implement joint exercises between the Air Defense Command posts within the next few months, to be followed by a joint Air Force exercise. In addition, their excellencies have agreed to continue their consultations and sharing of intelligence to promote and strengthen the GCC military collaboration in order to counter any threats and challenges to establish stability and security in the GCCs, and to counter any potential threats and risks that would threaten the stability of the region. Thank you.
We've been bringing you coverage of a statement that has been brought by the Secretary General of the Gulf Cooperation Council, Jasem Mohamed AlBudaiwi, following a meeting of defence ministers from GCC countries. Meeting here in Doha, that's following the Israeli attack on Hamas officials in Qatar, which happened on September the 9th. Israel had carried out airstrikes targeting a meeting of Hamas political figures here in Doha. It led to the deaths of 5 Hamas members and a Qatari officer. There was also a meeting a few days later by the Arab Islamic Extraordinary Summit It was an international meeting held between the Arab League and the Organization of Islamic Cooperation on the 15th of September in order to produce a joint statement against that Israeli attack. There were a number of speeches made which were very condemnatory of that Israeli attack. And now the Secretary General is outlining some of the security initiatives that the defense ministers have agreed on following that attack. We can go to Hoda Abdel-Hamid, who is live for us at that meeting. Hoda, just bring us up to date with the list of some of those items, at least, that the Secretary General was detailing there.
Well, he was saying that, following, as you mentioned, following the emergency summit that happened on September 15th, it was decided that basically the 6 GCC countries would boost their defense mechanism, especially when it comes to aerial defense. So the Secretary General here said they had agreed on 6 points that goes from joint training to joint intelligence sharing to joint coordination of all the sort of defense systems of the 6 GCC countries. That is basically the GCC standing in solidarity that an attack on one country is an attack on all 6 countries, and you could get that sense of urgency that there is a need now to make sure that the skies and to boost the aerial defense system specifically of the GCC, following what the Secretary General reiterated, or the attack on Israel that went against all the UN Charter and international law.
Yeah, Hoda, it's interesting that there should be this response, not least because that following the meeting that I was talking about earlier of the Arab-Islamic Extraordinary Summit, which was held here in Doha in order to discuss this attack by Israel, there was some criticism that the response from that, the statements that were coming out of that, were not as strong as people might have expected, given the fact that this was a direct attack on a country that was part of the GCC. But now we seem to be seeing this ramping up of the security elements and sharing of information that you're talking about.
Yes, absolutely. And I think it's important to note, first of all, how quickly things are going and how quickly decisions are being made at this specific moment, which gives you really that sense of urgency that exists. And I think it's also a unified position to counter Israel. Israel has been trying to sort of create wedges between GCC countries, pitting one country against the other. And I think this stand of them together, especially when it comes to the defense, especially when it comes to defending the skies and the borders of all 6 GCC countries at once and in coordination, is a very strong stance of that, and certainly the main consequence of that emergency summit.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it, just very briefly, that the nature of the decisions that have been made are, as we were just talking about, the sharing of intelligence information, but also the fact that there is going to be a ramping up of, as if I understand it correctly, Air Force defense maneuvers as well. We have about a minute before the end of the program, but it is interesting that they are specifically looking at preventing air attacks in the future.
Yes, absolutely, because that would be the biggest threat. If you listen to what Israel says and what Prime Minister Netanyahu says, who kind of threatened that he would carry out another attack if need be, this is the response of a unified 6 countries who do have a certain military capability, who are saying we're taking very seriously our air defenses, and we will put all the means necessary, and we will share all the information necessary, including training, including intelligence, including all the information they know, to make sure that Israel understands that this is a united front, and the GCC countries at the end of the day will always stand together in solidarity, despite the fact that sometimes they could have maybe political disagreements, but when it comes to defense, they are together.